そうそう、先輩。もう一件用事が残っているんです。
Oh, there's something that requires my attention?
なんだ。
先ほどの取り調べ室で待っていてもらえますか？ああ、心配しなくてももう6式はいませんから。
Is this new?
いられてたまるか。
It's your game,
待
Yaginuma.
っていればいいんだな。
Does he want me sitting in on another interrogation or something? In hindsight, I shouldn't have been surprised by who I found waiting
あ
there.
なたでしたか。
Seimazono looked up at me.
まるで私がここにいるのを知らなかったような物言いね。
その通りだよ。
Took the seat opposite hers. And then in comes Jie. Guard who'd been keeping an eye on Sei left, possibly since I was present to watch instead.
何が始まるの？
さあ、俺も聞かされていないものでね。
Got up, dragged the guard's empty chair over to the door, and took a seat there instead. The seat across from Seimazono wasn't meant for me, I suspected. Though I couldn't imagine it was for Yaginuma either. Yep. Just then the door opened. Yaginuma came in, accompanied by... Sei jolted to her feet. Dumbfoundment colored Chie's visage. But a mere moment later, she had tears racing down her cheeks. Chie rapidly closed the distance between them and plunged into Sei's free arm. Pure bewilderment dominated Sei's face, but it wasn't long before she gently tousled Chie's hair.
ごめんなさい。私のせいで。先生のせいじゃないのです。でも、ごめんなさい。
Sei broke down into tears as well.
感謝してくださいよ。被疑者同士を合わせるなんて。
Yaginuma whispered that into my ear as I beheld the scene.
検察がよく許したな。
二人に共謀していた様子はありませんし、何しろあちらからの要請でもあります。
Sure you didn't do it just to earn your career some more brownie points?
しかし、
Watched the two women embrace. Felt that the right move had been made as I did. I see. Oh, another new scene? At Moonworld? Oh. Is this where we're gonna see the conversation between Kyoko and Reiji? Kyoko flipped the sign outside Moonworld to close before locking the place up. She then took a breath, stretched out, her side still aching even after all these weeks. It reminded her of that poor girl every time it pulsated with pain. Kyoko rubbed the scar. She started closing up shop for the day. She wiped the counter, mopped the floor, and refilled the sugar. 10 years had already come and gone since she started doing this routine all by herself. Kyoko heaved another sigh and went behind the counter. She finished washing most of the dishes before she'd even closed up, so there wasn't too much left to do there. Kyoko lined her drinking glasses up on their shelves. She replaced those in the cafe's tableware many a time over the past decade, with the originals all but gone. There's basically nothing of him left here anymore, is there? Not infrequently had there been periods where Kyoko wondered if she'd been forced to fold the cafe. However, she always managed to keep going by the grace of her regulars, especially the woman who'd helped her sell her debt, leaving her with gratitude that she could never repay. It was only thanks to each and every one of them that she lasted so long on her own. But now, Kyoko opened a drawer and produced a handle from her broken cup. It was the last remnant of a priceless memento of him, one that had broken nearly 2 years ago to the date. And yet, she still couldn't bring herself to get rid of it. Her memories of him grew blurrier with each passing year. She couldn't even remember his face, one which hadn't aged a day over the last decade. He remained eternally young while she just kept growing older and older with each passing moment. And with that realization came a desire, no, a need, to find someone to spend her advancing years with. However, she knew in her heart of hearts that said someone wasn't him. Now when he was captive to an obsession, much like Kyoko herself had once been. No longer could she hold out hope that they could overcome it together. It was far too late for that by now. Besides, she knew his heart could never truly be hers. For someone who'd also lost the most important person in her life, she was painfully aware that it came with the territory. I see. I wonder if we will see that conversation, though. Wouldn't surprise me. Okay. Next day, another new scene right off rip. Whoa, that sounds like an innuendo if I ever heard one. Get on, ride on my back seat. The cafe was devoid of customers. Kyoko stood alone behind the counter, resting her chin in her hand. She'd long since lost count of how many times she'd sighed today. Though she was aware it wasn't the case, she still felt like she was waiting for nothing. Then again, she knew she had no place belly aching, seeing as how she was the one who hadn't specified a time. That said, she wasn't looking forward to this either. Yeah, this is where the conversation happens. While she had been the one who summoned him, a part of her would rather he not show at all. God, I'm so selfish, aren't I? The spotless drinking glass sat next to her. She'd skimmed its rim with her finger. We can't stay together any longer. That was the conclusion Kyoko had reached. She still considered him an irreplaceable friend, one who'd always been there for her when she needed it most. If she was forced to declare whether she liked or hated him, she'd pick the former in a heartbeat. However, she knew he would never belong to her as long as he remained captive to his obsession. And that was just too painful for her to live with. She could be chasing after him for years to come and still find herself no closer than when she started. Kyoko glanced at the edge of the counter. That was the spot where she'd used to sit and read all the time, before tragedy had struck and claimed her life. It had only been 2 years, so she still remembered those times like they were yesterday. No, perhaps it's more accurate to say she couldn't forget her, even if she tried. Now with all the lives she'd touched, especially his. Kyoko sighed. He and her had both known from the very start that they were merely a pair of wounded souls trying to drown out their own pain, nothing more. Though she didn't regret that, she wanted to put an end to their relationship before she started deluding herself to thinking there was more to it. For she wanted everything else about them to stay the same. Finally, after what felt like forever, he stepped into the cafe. Kyoko's heart nearly leapt out of her chest. Kyoko internally winced when her nerves distorted her standard greeting into something forced.
コーヒー頼むわ。
The two of them went through the motions of their typical routine. Everything afterward was also as per routine. Kyoko ground the coffee beans with gusto, poured hot water in the Nell drip to warm it up, then drained it. Afterward, she dumped the beans into the drip, then slowly poured the coffee when she'd finished steaming them. Sometimes she made the coffee in advance during rush hours, but typically she preferred to slave over each individual cup with as much attention as the last. That made the process take longer. That was exactly what Kyoko needed today. Kyoko served him a cup of coffee. Ugh. He took the cup and blew on the coffee as he sipped at it. Knowing him, he probably had an idea why she called him out at the cafe. So he just quietly sipped away at his coffee until she was ready to speak. However, she wanted to wait just a little longer. Though she resolved herself yesterday to go through with this, she was having a hard time actually taking the first step now that the moment of truth had arrived. Goodness, who do I think I am? Some shrinking violet of a schoolgirl?
どうかしたのか?
He cocked his head in confusion, as though she'd unintentionally worn some of her thoughts on her sleeve. Even Kyoko knew how transparent her lie
今日
was.
もお仕事？
まあな。警視庁に行ったんだが、
Though he didn't really get into the details, Kyoko sensed he was probably having a rough time.
魚住くんに頼めばどうかし。
あいつの上役がひときわ面倒なやつだからな。
He sipped at his coffee
お
again.
かわりいる？
Kyoko held aloft her pot when she noticed he was running low.
そうだな。
Quickly polished off his coffee, he presented his empty cup to Kyoko.
あのね、時坂くん、
Kyoko spoke up as she poured his coffee.
話したいことがあるのだけど。
that lights a star, the dearest things I know are what you are.
Okay, but we don't see the actual conversation. We see Kyoko's point of view leading up to it and her reasoning. Okay. What do we got? Moonworld?
いらっしゃい魚住くん。
Oh?
おう。
Uozumi gave a terse response, took a seat at the counter, upon which he was promptly served coffee by Kyoko. It was all perfectly routine for him by this
よう
point.
やくお仕事が始まるのね。
もう今日から始まっても当然だがな。
Uozumi dumped a handful of sugar cubes into his coffee.
いきなり泊まり込むことになりそうだ。
あら、よかったじゃない。お部屋まだ決まってないんでしょ？
ま、
Beat sleeping under a bridge at least, no doubt about that.
危険なお仕事？
Kyoko's voice lowered a few decibels as Uozumi sipped away at his sweetened
警
drink.
察の仕事に危険じゃないことなんざねえよ。
でも昇進したんでしょ？
俺は現場にいる方が性に合うからな。机に向かってるところなんざ想像できねえだろ。
魚住くんはそれでもいいと思うけどな。
勘弁してくれ。
冷めちゃってるけど、これ食べる？
Kyoko served Uozumi some bean jam muffins. Uozumi picked up one and took a bite. Though it hardened a bite from the cold, he chewed it up all the same. His tongue then came alive with the sweet tang of red bean paste. Tasted even better than usual, all because he hadn't had anything to eat since lunch.
もう一つもらっ。
え、どうぞ。
Kyoko giggled and served him another muffin.
ご飯あまり食べてなかったの？
忙しくなると食ってる暇もなくなる。
Uozumi polished off the muffin and drank his coffee. The sweetness of the jam made for the perfect companion with his drink.
おにぎりでも作る？
I love the way Uozumi reacts just to like the most basic little gesture from Kyoko. Would you like me to make you some rice balls later?
しばらく本庁に詰めなきゃならねえから。
Oh, Uozumi.
それじゃあ取りにも来られないわね。持っていくわけにもいかないでしょうし。
Kyoko thoughtfully tapped her
い
chin.
や、気持ちだけいただくからよ。
そう？
For a moment, Uozumi swore he caught disappointment flashing across Kyoko's face, but he quickly chalked it up to his overactive imagination.
そ
God
れより
damn it,
も
Uozumi.
頼みがあるんだ。
There's a dime piece practically handing herself over to you, and you're fumbling it so hard. God damn it, you piss me off. Both you and Reiji. Like, Reiji already had it, but he's too obsessed with, the ghost of a teenager to fucking go at it. And then, it's being practically handed to you. I guess I'm saying it, alright? When referring to Kyoko, that's weird, but like, she's practically right there, be like, you're trying to warm up to you, try to get in with you, and you're like, nope, 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 actually, nope, That's the thing, Reiji has it, but doesn't really want it. Not in the way that Kyoko wants him to want it. And then Uozumi also wants it, is being offered it, but is too scared to actually go for it. That's crazy. You both suck. You both suck. Just saying. Kyoko's an absolute dime, and y'all too pussy. You're both too pussy. I hate it. I hate it. An amazing woman like Kyoko, who's gone through everything she has, and both the guys she has an eye on, neither one of them are willing to sack the fuck up and be a man. You hate to see it. You hate to see it.
あら、何？
俺の代わりに部屋を見つけてきてくれないか。
Uozumi finally voiced the question that had been weighing on him since that morning.
私が？いいの？
おう。そうでもしねえといつまでも決められそうにねえからな。
God, look at Kyoko here. Gorgeous. And like obviously Uozumi notices this. Because look at him. He can't even look at her.
じゃあ、条件を聞いておかないとね。
You. Kyoko suddenly produced a pencil and paper, seemingly out of nowhere.
まずは大体の場所とお家賃かしらね。それから広さかしら。
Kyoko started firing off questions like a Tommy gun.
そうさな。
Uozumi considered places that make for an easy commute from work as he answered Kyoko's questions one after another. Uh-oh, we got a red scene. We got a red scene. This is after, this is after Rokishi's jailbreak. Makuro Rokishi boarded a train at Ueno Station in broad daylight, transferred to the Tobotoju line at Ikebukuro Station, before getting off at Kami-Itabashi Station, then followed the Keishi line until he reached Grant Heights. Fuck you. Fuck you. All those fucking Japanese names, just to finish it with Grant Heights. Yes, boarded at Ueno, then went to Tobotoju and Ikebukuro, Kami-Itabashi, the Keishi line, and then reached Grant Heights. Okay, it's a US, okay. Still, all that to end in a fucking American name. It was a US military residential area surrounded by gates manned by armed American soldiers, a little slice of America located right within Japan. So naturally, Japanese laws didn't apply here. Oroshiki changed into some presentable clothes he'd stolen along the way and struck up a conversation with one of the soldiers. He'd come all this way to meet with a US Army officer stationed at Grant Heights. Though Oroshiki was capable of simple conversations in English, his grasp of the overall language left a lot to be desired. But eventually, through trial and error, he managed to piece together that the officer in question had already been repatriated to the USA. He also learned that management of Grant Heights had transferred from the Army to the Air Force during his captivity, much to his dismay. For as much as Oroshiki tried to stay in control of every situation, even he couldn't have foreseen this turn of events. Without his inside man, he no longer had any reason to stay there. Oroshiki had a fucking inside man with the US Army? That's crazy. Thus he decided to leave before the officers found him suspicious and reported him to the Japanese government. Oroshiki needed a place to hide. He figured it was safe to assume that the police had their eyes on all the locations he'd been previously associated with. Fortunately for him, no matter how well he blended in with the crowds, there was always a chance he'd be spotted in a place under heavy surveillance. Oh, so this is gonna show us how he ended up coercing Fumiya, huh? Eventually, Orochi decided to head toward Mitaka, sticking to crowded streets and passing himself off as just one of Tokyo's many civilians while approaching his destination. He was planning to hide right under their noses, someplace he knew, yet one they'd never think to look. Even if he was still there, Orochi could probably leverage their past together to buy himself some time. Orochi snuck into the estate grounds. The lights in the main house were on. Not that he'd been planning to go in there, of course. No, he instead tiptoed over to the clinic located literally just a hop, skip, and a jump away. Not only was it part of the estate, but it was probably unlocked too. As far as he knew, no one was using it anymore. He'd heard that Director Yasutada Kichiki had resigned from his post at the Kichiki Pathological Research Institute during his incarceration, as well as the fact that the facility in question had been renamed to Kichiki Hospital. Therefore, Yasutada's son Fumiya had likely taken over management, leaving this clinic without a master. Orochi opened the old-fashioned glass door and snuck into the clinic without making a sound. That's terrifying. It seemed someone had been keeping the place clean. So much so, in fact, that one would be forgiven for thinking it was still open for business. As such, Orochi intuitively understood that he needed to find a hiding place where even the building's caretaker wouldn't stumble across him. Fortunately for him, there was a large space akin to a closet in the back of the examination room. What's more, there were even sheets there to keep him warm at night. As Orochi looked around, he noticed a square object wrapped in cloth sitting against the corner. First, he didn't find it befitting of a clinic, but then he remembered that the Kichiki Pathological Research Institute had been decorated with them. Indeed, it was a painting, and one by Shinzo Mami at that. However, Orochi didn't recognize it. Thus, he figured it was probably that unpublished painting that the police had been talking about. Now wait, hold up. You're telling me that painting just fucking showed up there? So Orochiki didn't nab the painting. Orochiki didn't take it for whatever reason. Did we ever figure out who did take it? Because we found it at the clinic, so we kind of assumed he had taken it, right? But if he didn't, and it wound up at the Kichiki clinic, the hell did Fumiya do? It would have had to have either been Fumiya or Chizuru who did it. How the hell did Exile of Paradise end up there? What the fuck? There were newspapers piled next to it. Their dates were fairly recent. Orochiki ardently read through each and every single one of them as if he were devouring the letters themselves. He needed to know what happened during his imprisonment. Eventually caught up on the events of the last month. Through the papers, he learned that not only was this painting known as Exile of Paradise, but that Tokuchiki's remains had been discovered. And the more he read, the more it dawned upon him that these newspapers were all ones that specifically featured articles about those two topics in particular. Fascinating. Orochiki had long since suspected that Fumiya Kichiki possessed an anomalous attachment to his niece, but he'd never known it was such an unhealthy obsession. Wait. I can make use of this. Suddenly he heard the clinic door opening. There were only so many people who would be here at this hour. Orochiki hid in the closet and spied on the newcomer. Turned out to be Fumiya Kichiki, just as he'd suspected. Fumiya staggered forward. It only took Orochiki a moment to realize he was acting odd. Inebriated, is he? Fumiya set down a bottle of liquor that he'd been carrying before sitting on the floor. His back was turned to Orochiki. Though Orochiki couldn't see the look on Fumiya's face, he didn't have to worry about getting caught. Fumiya moaned his deceased niece's name. Gears in Oroshi's mind started rotating at breakneck speeds once he took stock of the bizarre spectacle. I have everything I need to win him over. He should make for a sufficient pawn. And so Orochi decided to reveal himself to Fumiya as the latter drowned his sorrows while pleasuring himself. Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god. No wonder Chizuru hated Toko. Jesus fuck. That's not the reveal I was fucking expecting, dude. Don't tell me he actually did something to her. Please don't tell me that. Like, no wonder Toko was running away from home. She had a fucking adoptive parent who fucking was attracted to her, and then the other adoptive parent fucking hated her because the one was attracted to her. Oh my god. Jesus fucking Christ. God damn. Don't talk about his spunk right now. Fumiya literally sprang up and bent back like he'd been struck by lightning before timidly looking at Orochiki's way. Yeah. What do you say about tucking your cock back in your pants? Orochiki gestured to Fumiya's lower body. Fumiya zipped up his pants without even making an excuse for himself. Good. Orochi grabbed the painting sitting next to him. Yeah, why the fuck did Fumiya steal the painting? That introduces so many more questions. Like, all this time, like, when they first said, like, oh yeah, Orochi coerced Fumiya into doing it, it's like, at first it made sense, like, yeah, he threatened to do something to Chizuru, yada yada yada, of course, but it's like, no, there's deeper shit going on with Fumiya. Why the hell would he steal the painting? Like, okay, he had a hard-on for his niece, alright, very unfortunate, but it's like, that doesn't explain why the painting's there. That doesn't explain why there's articles about the painting there. What? Why is the painting there? Why did you steal that? What are you doing with it? It's not like the painting has anything to do with Toko, so why is that interspersed with all your news articles about Toko?
例えばこの絵、なぜここにあるのでしょうか。それは東京都美術館から盗まれたと新聞記事にありましたね。
Roshiki took control of the conversation with practice ease.
なるほど。確かにあなたならば
Yeah.
捜査線上にも登らないでしょうし。
I never suspected Fumiya for a second.
いや、これには
Go
わ
on.
けがありまして。
あなたのその理由を警察が納得してくれると思いますか。どうあれ盗難品がここにある事実は動かせません。
I don't even care if it holds up in a court of law. I just want to know his reasons. I genuinely want to know. What the fuck? Oroshiki relentlessly drove Fumiya further and further against the wall.
まあもっともこの私が言えた義理ではありませんが。
そうですよ。どうして捕まっているはずの斉藤先生がこんなところに。
出てきたからですよ。無論
I left.
警察の許可を得てはいませんがね。
脱獄。
ええ。ですからあなたが通報すれば私はすぐに捕まってしまいます。
Oroshiki set Exile of Paradise before
その
him.
時この絵があればどうなるでしょうね。あなたはほんの出来心だったのかもしれませんが、渦中にある絵ですからね。
お願いします。このことは。
では取引をしましょう。
取引。
私はとある人物を治療しなくてはなりません。あなたの協力が不可欠なのですよ。
治療ですか。
ええ、それが医者の本分ですからね。その代わりあなたの目的のためにも私は最大限の協力をさせていただきますよ。
僕の
朽木塔子、彼女についてはよく知っていますからね。
Fumiya gasped. There it is. Now I have him dancing in the palm of my hand.
さあ、では明日からでも始めましょう。我々の将来のために。
What the hell is his dream? What the fuck is going on? What the fuck is going on? Okay. New scene, baby. Let's go. Oh, we're going to Moonworld? Kyoko closed her signboard inside and flipped the sign on the cafe door to close once her last customer for the day had left. She then retrieved a broom from her closet and started sweeping the street. She swiftly collected cigarette butts and waste paper in a dustpan before dumping them all into a garbage can. Then she did it all over again. It was all part of her daily routine, so it didn't bother her. Kyoko went back into her cafe and swept the floors. Though she cleaned every single day, the foot traffic she garnered always undid her hard work. So much so that her floorboards had lost much of their luster. Maybe I should get someone to wax them once the weather's a little nicer. Kyoko continued sweeping with that thought in mind. Suddenly, she caught sight of a few faded blotches between the floorboards. Kyoko gently nursed her side. Didn't hurt anymore. Though it was possible the whole experience would leave her with a scar, she didn't lament what had happened. After all, there were plenty of people she knew who'd suffered far worse than the likes of her. When she finished wiping down the tables, Kyoko gathered all the sugar bowls and carried them over to the counter. She then got to work on refilling them after putting away her cleaning utensils. First, she took out 2 bags, one of granulated sugar, one of castor sugar. She then poured the latter into a jar that was the size of the smaller. It was a special jar she hadn't used in a while. Many people preferred castor sugar over granulated sugar because the former was sweeter, though he had joked that the real reason was that it was cheaper, back when they discussed the subject over a decade ago, that is. Kyoko sighed and washed her hands. She'd long since gotten used to the cold weather that was particular to this season. Kyoko tended to her chapped hands with a sponge gourd. Next, she did the dishes she hadn't managed to get around to before the cafe closed. Unfortunately, the cups remained stained brown with coffee despite the daily cleaning she gave them. A lot of them had also broken and been thrown away over the years. Is that the fate of everything that's part of this cafe? Kyoko set the tableware in her drainer tray. She then sank onto a stool, opened a notebook, and recorded the day's sales. In the meantime, she considered the ingredients and coffee beans she'd have to order. Though things have been tough lately, she'd be able to manage.
あ、ごめんなさい。
Kyoko turned around when she heard the door open, slightly chiding herself for forgetting to lock it. Uozumi? Yeah.
そうか。
魚住くん
Kyoko rose from her stool and stopped Uozumi just as he was turning to leave.
待って。大丈夫よ。
おお、そうか。
Uozumi swiveled back around and scratched his head. Kyoko went behind the counter and started brewing coffee.
あ、全部片付けちまったんならいい。
そういうわけにはいかないわよ。
Kyoko checked the stove for the kettle before firing it
ちょっ
up.
と待っててね。
Uozumi nodded after some hesitation. Knowing him, he was probably has more work waiting for him once he's done here, doesn't he? It was with that thought Kyoko picked a small thermos off the shelf. Uozumi said nothing the whole time she boiled the water and extracted the coffee. While that wasn't uncommon for him, Kyoko found him resting his chin in his hands and dozing off when she snuck a peek at him. He must be exhausted. Though he'd served with the MPD for years beforehand, that didn't change the fact that he'd been working at a police department out in the countryside until just a few weeks ago. The workload in Tokyo must have been a whole different level compared to there. It was those thoughts that Kyoko poured the freshly extracted coffee into the thermos. Uozumi sat upright when she did, likely aroused by the drink's rich aroma.
疲れているんじゃない？
いや、
Uozumi put on a brave face. Typical Uozumi. Kyoko served him his coffee with a sugar bowl before setting the thermos beside it.
おい。
持って行ってちょうだい。帰りも車なんでしょ？
まあ、そうだけどよ。
居眠り運転で交通事故。
わかってるよ。
Uozumi dumped several spoonfuls of castor sugar into his coffee, then started mixing it with a spoon, likely knowing how hard it was for the sugar to dissolve on its own. Uozumi heaved a sigh after sipping his coffee.
疲れていると甘いものが欲しくなるって言うわよ。
バカ言え。俺はいつも同じだ。
So you're always tired then. Rather than say that, Kyoko simply took some sugar candies out of a glass jar and set them on a plate. Not sure how to interpret that sound, but I don't think he was displeased. Uozumi picked up one of the candies and ate it. Oh! Homeboy can make eye contact now. Big moves, Uozumi, big moves.
何？
Ah! No! Come on! Stop fumbling it! Uozumi quickly backpedaled and drank his coffee. That too was typical Uozumi. Yes? Eye
ひょっと
contact?
してお部屋のこと？
Kyoko whipped out her notebook, the flyer from the real estate agent stashed away within
昨
it.
日の今日だからあまり変わっていないけれど、西荻窪の駅近くにいい物件があったわよ。
西荻窪っつったら、霊人地の近くじゃ
I
ん。
don't want to be near Aiden.
時坂くんは駅から少し離れてるわよ。
まあ、そうだけどよ。
Uozumi held out his empty coffee cup. There was a small mountain of undissolved sugar at the bottom of it. Kyoko filled the cup with coffee. It's alright. This is all just perfectly routine.
ああ、そのことなんだがよ。
Yes. Uozumi spoke up, still gripping the cup.
もう住むところ決まっちゃったか。
Kyoko quickly interjected. She didn't know why, but she didn't want to hear. No, she wanted to delay what he had to say next.
そういうわけじゃねえんだ。
Uozumi scratched his head. The cafe was dead silent for quite some time after that. Sack up. Sack up. Uozumi hung his head before speaking. He was no longer looking at Kyoko. Kyoko took a deep breath when he wasn't paying attention and waited for him to continue.
その、なんだ、あれだ。少しばかり、
Maybe
広い
one
部
that
屋
could
を
fit
探してくれねえか。
2 people?
それはだな。
Uozumi's gnarled fingers anxiously tapped his coffee cup.
二人で住んでも平気なように。
Yeah? Uozumi awkwardly looked away. It was red to his
一
ears.
緒に暮らさねえか。
Uozumi, you dog! At long last, Uozumi mustered every last ounce of courage he had and uttered those words. Kyoko's eyes widened. She figured that was where this had been going. And yet, she shed tears all the same.
悪い。 いきなりこんなこと言われても困っ
ええ、困っちゃうわ。
だよな。
Oh, the things
そんなの
Uozumi cocked his head.
私はもう少しだけ。
Kyoko awkwardly shifted her gaze. In her heart of hearts, she already had her answer, yet couldn't bring herself to say it for some reason.
レイジか。
Kyoko instinctively tensed
お前
up.
らのことは知ってるよ。
Uozumi sounded calmer and more composed than Kyoko had ever heard him
た
before.
だの横連母なのかもしれねえが、どうしても伝えたくてな。
Nah, that's fair. That's real shit. Uozumi got out of his
魚
seat.
住くん。
コーヒー、ありがたくもらっていくぜ。
え
Damn.
え、気をつけてね。
Like, I always knew Uozumi was a real one, but damn. Uozumi really a real one. For a while afterward, Kyoko simply stared at the door Uozumi departed through.
kiss of springtime that makes the lonely
Damn. Okay. Okay. So Uozumi never made a move because he always knew there was something between Reiji and Kyoko. He didn't want to interrupt what was going on with his homies. Even though he doesn't know that something that they had, put a kibosh to the intimacy, right? He still is like, you know what? I gotta say something. I got a lot more respect for Uozumi now. I was chastising him a lot earlier. I was. But I'm willing to admit, Uozumi was being big homie. He thought there was something between his two homies. Didn't want to get in between it. Even though he definitely had feelings for homegirl, he was like, they got something going on. I don't want to fuck it up for them. Those are my two homies. I love them. Ain't gonna fuck it up for them. But now he's at a point where he's like, you know what? Even if it's a hard no, a slap in the face, even, I gotta say my piece. I gotta get it out there. I respect that. Big ups to Uozumi. Anyway, I'm sure this is the same scene, but now we're gonna see it from Fumiya's perspective. Fumiya sat still as a statue in the driver's seat. He was parked outside of a Tokyo hospital in an ambulance. What's more, he'd been instructed to wait there. Many times he'd considered driving away and hurrying over to the nearest police station, but if he did that, his life would be ruined. He couldn't afford to let that happen. Just then, the Rokshiki emerged from the hospital. He had two local nurses in tow. Surely they had no idea that they were in the company of a fugitive serial killer. They dragged a stretcher alongside them as they went. There was already a patient lying there. Eriko Yaginuma. Rokshiki had ordered Fumiya to take her back to the clinic. He claimed it was so he could cure her. However, Fumiya wasn't sure it was truly possible to wake someone from a coma spanning over a decade and a half. She had formerly been hospitalized at Kichiki Hospital. Not even his own father managed to cure her during her stay there. That was something Rokshiki should have known as well, given that he'd worked for them at the time. Minutes later, the back doors opened and Eriko was loaded into the ambulance, stretcher and all. The nurses apparently hadn't noticed Fumiya. He was wearing a disguise just in case, though. Would they label me as an accomplice to a crime if they found out my identity? Rokshiki got in the passenger seat once Eriko had been safely
行
loaded.
きましょうか。
はい。
Fumiya turned the key and fired up the ambulance.
狭い道は振動が患者に悪い影響を与えてしまいますから。
Rokshiki gave directions. Fumiya simply did as he was
彼
told.
女には治療が必要なのですよ。
Rokshiki said that out loud as though he'd surmised Fumiya's
治
thoughts.
療が必要なのはわかります。
今まで行っていたのは治療ではなく、ただの延命に過ぎません。もちろん治療の手立てがなかったことも問題の一つではあり
Yeah,
ました。
see, he's been using specific language. He's like, there is no means to cure her. I'm going to treat her. Rokshiki turned around to look at
今
Eriko.
の私であれば、彼女に救いをもた
Yeah,
らすこと
he's
が
not
でき
using the
る
word
でしょう。
cure. He's going to treat her. He's going to save her. Fumiya couldn't so much as wager a guess what Rokishi's precise definition of salvation entailed in this scenario. I mean, you should be able to. You kept up with the news, buddy. You should fucking know what he means by salvation. Fumiya turned off the ambulance lights long before approaching the clinic. He also parked quietly so that none of the neighbors would hear them. Once stopped, he got out of the ambulance and unloaded the stretcher from the rear. Fumiya and Roshiki brought Eriko into the clinic. The IV bottle shook as they moved her, but nothing changed. She just kept on sleeping like
これ
always.
でいいでしょう。
Oroshiki nodded to himself with
あ
satisfaction.
りがとうございます。車を戻してきて構いませんよ。
ええ
Fumi had taken the ambulance from Kichiki Hospital without telling anyone. As such, he had to put it back before his absence was noticed.
しかしろくな設備もないここで
He's
一
like,
体
I'm not
ど
going
ん
to
な治
cure
療
her.
を
I'm going to treat her.
それはあなたは知らない方がいいでしょうね。
That statement sent harrowing shivers down Fumia's spine, but he had no choice but to obey Oroshiki. Yeah, I'm very curious to find out what Fumia's whole fucking deal is. It's starting to piss me off. Another red scene. Oh, is this gonna be fucking detailing exactly how Oroshiki did it? Yep. It sure is. Great. That's what I wanted to see today. The stage was set. Before him was that abhorrent excuse of a woman. She had turned her back on the Lord's teachings and committed a grave sin. The circumstances of such were utterly irrelevant. Now that Oroshiki was faced with such an apostate, he couldn't find it in his heart to forgive her. Fortunately, he required no anesthesia. She hadn't woken once in the last decade or so, so she wouldn't be waking now. All of her doctors had thrown in the towel and settled for merely keeping her alive. So really, performing her last rites was a mercy. Not only was this best for her, but for her family too. Oroshiki procured a scalpel. The master of this clinic had never once wielded it. However, Oroshiki disinfected and honed it all the same. Such tasks were unnecessary for this particular operation, but the sharper, the better. Oroshiki made an incision into her abdomen. She didn't bleed all that much, likely due to low blood pressure. Still, her body jolted slightly. That said, it was merely a reflex, not a sign of her reawakening. Oroshiki widened the aperture, sucking out the accumulating blood and bodily fluids. Her feebly pulsating organs came into view. They were all in exquisite condition, likely the result of them rarely ever seeing use. Were Oroshiki an organ trafficker, he would have taken and preserved them without a second thought. However, he wasn't interested in such things. No, there was only one organ of hers that held his interest: the uterus. He removed the connecting blood vessels, intestines, and other entrails with forceps. Her uterus shone white, almost as if it had been consecrated by the Lord himself. That was exactly why he couldn't forgive her for defiling it in her selfishness. As a token gesture, he tied several of her blood vessels and stopped the bleeding. Though she deserved no such mercy, he still wished to leave the room as spotless as possible to show his host gratitude. Oroshiki stuck a pair of scissors into her abdomen and cut up her vagina. Okay, you didn't need to do that. Thanks. Once done, he reached inside and ripped out her uterus. He could feel its warmth flooding into his gloved hands. However, this woman had neglected to share that warmth with the innocent child who once nestled within it. Oroshiki set the uterus aside on a small tray. My, how long it's been since I've seen such a fresh uterus. Don't say fresh uterus to me. He gouged out part of it with a scalpel before washing it freely of bodily fluids and blood in the sink.
これはなかなか。
It reeked of blood and was firm as rubber. What's more, the inside was so soft that it could almost melt in his mouth. This is it. The forbidden fruit. Roshi chewed on the hard portions as he decided to continue his work. There was still something he wished to try. It was a test that no sane medical institution would ever permit. The one before him had severe brain damage. He heard that hypoxia had deprived her brain of virtually all function. As such, he wondered if it would be possible for him to cure that. Thus, Roshi took up the scalpel once more. He made an incision in the center of her forehead, right between her eyebrows, and exposed her skull. He then picked up a hard crank drill and bored a hole into her cranium. Such techniques were frequently used to sever the frontal lobe in lobotomies. Roshi followed that up by inserting a paper-thin needle into the hole. He could find out which parts of her brain were dead or alive by stimulating her cerebral cortex. Some spots produced no reaction at all, while others induced a slight twitch in her fingers. But then, all of a sudden, when he prodded a different part of her brain,
ほう。
Roshi's voice rose in awe. Tears streamed out of her eyes. Roshi couldn't tell whether she'd done so consciously or if it were merely a reflex spurred on by that stimulus. However, he didn't care to try again to find out. For in his composed state of mind, He interpreted it as her shedding tears in lament of her fate.